For decades, the Boeing 747 ruled the skies like no other aircraft in history. Known as the Queen of the Skies, it wasn't just a plane, it was a global symbol of progress, luxury, and human ambition. So when the final 747 rolled off the production line, most people believed the story was over. A legendary farewell, the end of an era. But just when the world had accepted its retirement, something unexpected started stirring behind the scenes. Whispers? Speculation? A quiet resurgence that has aviation fans asking one question again: is the 747 really done? To understand why this matters, you have to go back to how the 747 changed everything. In the late 1960s, air travel was exploding. Airports were congested, tickets were expensive, and long-haul flying was still a luxury reserved for the few. Boeing was given a near-impossible task: build an aircraft so large and efficient that it could carry hundreds of passengers at once, easing airport congestion and slashing costs per seat. What emerged was nothing short of revolutionary. With its massive fuselage and unmistakable hump, the 747 instantly rewrote the rules of commercial aviation from the moment it entered service in 1970. The jumbo jet became the backbone of international travel. Airlines used it to connect continents directly, opening routes that had never been viable before. Its sheer size allowed ticket prices to drop, making long-haul travel accessible to millions. Inside, it felt like a flying palace. Wide cabins, lounges, spiral staircases on some variants. This wasn't just transportation, it was an experience. For many passengers, their first long-haul flight was on a 747, and that memory stuck. For years, nothing could challenge it. Boeing produced nearly 1,600 of these giants, and the aircraft became a familiar sight at major airports around the world. It even made history outside commercial aviation, setting records and performing extraordinary missions that cemented its legendary status. The Queen of the Skies wasn't just dominant, she was untouchable. But aviation never stands still. As fuel prices climbed and environmental pressure increased, airlines began rethinking everything. For engines, once seen as a symbol of power and safety, slowly became a liability. New technologies allowed twin-engine aircraft to fly longer distances more efficiently, with far lower fuel burn and maintenance costs. Models like the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350 promised similar range with dramatically better economics. Quietly at first, airlines began retiring their 747s. The numbers told a brutal story. Compared to modern wide-bodies, the 747 burned significantly more fuel per hour. Over a year of operations, that difference translated into tens of millions of dollars. At the same time, noise regulations tightened, and emissions targets became impossible to ignore. The Queen was no longer the smartest business decision. One by one, passenger operators phased her out. And when Boeing delivered the final aircraft, it felt like the closing of a chapter that would never be reopened. But that's where the story takes a turn. While passenger fleets were shrinking, another side of the aviation world was paying close attention. Cargo operators never stopped loving the 747. In fact, for freight, it had something no modern aircraft could match: a nose-loading door. This single feature allowed oversized and heavy cargo to be loaded straight into the aircraft, something no twin-engine wide-body could do. Combined with its massive internal volume, the 747 became the ultimate heavy-lift machine. As global logistics expanded and e-commerce exploded, demand for air freight surged. Then came the pandemic. Supply chains broke. Sea freight slowed. Time-sensitive goods needed to move fast. And suddenly, the 747 was indispensable again. Hundreds of 747 freighters were flying non-stop, moving medical equipment, electronics, and critical supplies across the globe. While passenger versions faded away, the cargo queen was thriving. What makes this even more interesting is that Boeing had anticipated this decades earlier. When the original 747 was designed, engineers quietly planned for a future where passenger demand might fall. The aircraft's structure made conversion to a freighter unusually straightforward. That foresight paid off. While competitors struggled to adapt their super jumbos for cargo, the 747 slipped seamlessly into its second life. Now, with global travel rebounding and cargo demand still strong, attention has shifted again. Airlines are facing packed airports, slot shortages, and booming demand on certain high-density routes. At the same time, passengers are placing more value on comfort, space, and long-haul stability. In that environment, the idea of large-capacity aircraft no longer sounds as outdated as it once did. This is where speculation begins. There's growing buzz in aviation circles about whether a modernized version of the 747 concept could make sense again. Not a simple restart, but a reimagined, giant lighter materials, cleaner engines, improved aerodynamics, and better efficiency. Nothing has been confirmed. These are reports, not announcements. But the conversation alone says something important. The Queen of the Skies still refuses to be forgotten. Of course, the challenges are enormous. Restarting production would be wildly expensive. Certification standards are tougher than ever. Boeing would have to prove that any revived jumbo could meet modern safety, efficiency, and environmental expectations without repeating past mistakes. Airlines, burned before by overly ambitious programs, would demand absolute confidence. And yet, aviation history has a way of circling back. The 747 has already defied expectations, once transforming from a passenger icon into the undisputed king of cargo. Whether it ever returns to passenger service in a new form remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The story of the Boeing 747 didn't end with its final delivery. It simply changed altitude, and that shift in altitude may be exactly what keeps the 747 relevant in the years ahead. Because while newer aircraft dominate headlines with efficiency claims, there's a growing realization that aviation doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in cycles. What seems obsolete in one decade can become essential in the next, depending on economics, infrastructure, and global demand. Airports around the world are already feeling the strain again. Slots at major hubs are limited. Adding more flights isn't always possible, no matter how efficient the aircraft are. In those environments, carrying more passengers per movement becomes valuable. A single large aircraft can sometimes do the work of two smaller ones, easing congestion rather than adding to it. That logic is quietly re-entering airline planning rooms. Passenger expectations are shifting too. After years of ultra-dense cabins and minimal comfort, long-haul travelers are becoming more selective. Space, stability, and cabin atmosphere matter, especially on flights lasting 10 hours or more. The 747's wide interior and smooth ride were never accidents. They were part of what made it so beloved in the first place, and those qualities haven't lost their appeal. Meanwhile, cargo demand shows no signs of collapsing. E-commerce continues to grow. High-value goods still need speed. Industries like healthcare, aerospace, and technology rely on rapid global logistics. In that world, the 747 freighter remains unmatched. No other aircraft combines payload, volume, and loading flexibility in quite the same way. As long as global trade depends on fast, reliable air freight, the jumbo jet has a seat at the table. That's why talk of the 747's future never fully disappears. Even if it never returns as a mainstream passenger aircraft, its design philosophy lives on. Large, adaptable, mission-flexible aircraft still matter. The Queen of the Skies proved that scale can change economics, reshape routes, and redefine what's possible. So when people ask whether the 747 is truly finished, the honest answer is more complicated than yes or no. Its role has evolved, its spotlight has shifted, but its influence remains everywhere, from cargo ramps to design studios, from airport layouts to the way engineers think about capacity and range. That lingering presence is why the 747 still feels unfinished even now. Every time a freighter lifts off with its unmistakable silhouette, it reminds the industry that some designs are simply ahead of their time and resilient enough to outlive trends. The Queen of the Skies didn't just serve one purpose. She adapted, and that adaptability is exactly what keeps her relevant in conversations about the future. There's also a cultural factor that numbers alone can't explain. Few aircraft have ever captured public imagination the way the 747 did. For generations, it represented global connection. It was the plane you flew when something big was happening, moving across continents, reuniting families, opening new chapters. That emotional weight still matters, especially for airlines that see branding and passenger perception as part of their competitive edge. At the same time, Aviation is entering a period of uncertainty. Fuel technology is evolving. Sustainability targets are tightening. Infrastructure growth isn't keeping pace with demand. In moments like these, the industry often looks backward for lessons that can shape what comes next. The 747's story offers one clear takeaway. Flexibility beats perfection. A design that can pivot from passenger icon to cargo powerhouse can survive shifts that destroy more specialized aircraft. Whether the 747 ever returns in a new passenger form remains